Hi gang, Jen George again from Tammy. Today I'm live with Steve from DriveYello and we're at WeWork in Pyrmont. So Steve, who the hell are you?
Who the hell am I?
Big question.
I'm a digital entrepreneur who's been around in the game now for just on 20 odd years. Started in the digital agency space back in 2000, built a digital marketing platform called Traction out of that, and we took that global with offices in New York and London. And I sold that business as a successful exit along with the Traction business as well back in 2010, and have been in the startup space ever since, doing lots of mentoring at accelerators like Mira-D and starting my own app incubator called the App Village.
Oh, wow.
Which went for a year and a half until I decided that it was time to focus on a single product and service, and that's when DriveYello came about. And been running that now for actually coming up to our third birthday of the idea, which was Halloween.
How did you come up with that Halloween?
Well, Johnny and I were the co-founders. We have kids who go to school together, and we were doing trick or treating with them. And he was a Crust franchisee, and got a call that night to say that a few drivers had called in sick.
Yep.
So, and my instant response is, surely there's an app you can go on and replace them, sort of out, and there wasn't. And even this is pre-Deliveroo, pre-Uber Eats, whole bunch of what are now very popular ordering platforms.
Yep.
And but we've been in the game since then. It's not only just a driver management platform, but I suppose logistics overall, but also just order management platform as well.
Yep.
So,
that's exciting.
It is exciting.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great.
So who do you work with?
We've got some big brands. Because we're a B2B business who help them deliver B2C.
Yeah.
So
you're normally the tech behind the scenes that people.
That's right, the tech and the marketplace. Right. So it's a combination of the two, and they don't necessarily see us. So the consumer doesn't necessarily know our name, but people at McDonald's and people at Woolworths and BWS and big brands like La Poqueta down in Victoria, for example, they're all users. So Menulog is we're a preferred partner with Menulog. So all these are all brands who would need assistance in providing last mile delivery to their customers, and that's what we do.
That's fantastic. So getting started as two-sided marketplace is always difficult. So how have you moved from a tech platform to then growing that two-sided marketplace?
Well, it sort of they started together. So we all, because in Australia back then there wasn't many driver-rider marketplaces.
Exploded.
So we had to create our own, and we did that pretty easily, a lot easier than we thought it was going to be, actually, to be honest. But it's actually getting a little bit harder in ensuring you have a good driver and rider marketplace. It's one thing establishing it, but then you obviously have to ensure they're educated, they're trained, they're the right people for the job. And so that's been the process of learning for us, is that finding out exactly the process and the education required to ensure that they do the job that they need to do.
Yeah.
It is a marketplace, so we don't employ them.
Yeah.
They're all independent directors, but we do hold a level of responsibility, if you like, around the service we provide, and we do that through the technology as well. Drivers and riders are managed through the technology, but also the consumer gets to track them, and that's a great offering that the brands that we work with want to offer to the consumer.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And so you've seen a lot of startups in your time, I'm sure, come and go. Yeah. From a marketplace point of view, what do you see as the biggest challenges for startups to scale hyperlocal two-sided marketplaces?
How long
just
have you got?
Look,
marketplaces are very hard, and it's funny you say the difficulty in scaling. It's not so much it's the requirement of scale is probably the most challenging thing. So some things just don't work at a small level. So therefore you almost need a level of funding to get you to that level that actually makes the marketplace work. Yep. Credibility on our side was as an early startup was hard, even though we were very lucky in getting exposure to brands like McDonald's and big brands like Menulog, etc. early in the piece, and that helped one side of the marketplace, I should say, but speed of growth is probably what's required, and just keeping that balance between the two is probably the most challenging thing. And for example, right now we've got probably more drivers than we need, and that makes it hard to keep them engaged because if there's no work, then they go looking elsewhere. So we have to start ramping that up, and we are, and we've got some pretty big things happening in the next 3 or 4 months, which is great.
Awesome. Very exciting.
It is.
And customer loyalty and what's become a saturated market, or even driver loyalty. What do you do as a brand to ensure that you can keep them engaged?
That's a good question. Driver loyalty is an interesting one. We find,
right?
Well, is it even required? Is the question, right? So do they need? What I mean by that, of course, you want them loyal to your brand, but do they need to be exclusively loyal? That's a different thing. In a marketplace like ours, I don't think they need to be exclusively loyal. They just need to see you as an opportunity that is worth pursuing, that is at least equal or near enough to the other players that are in the marketplace. So obviously we're competing on a driver perspective with the Ubers, the Deliverers, etc., driver and rider perspective. But we find that there are plenty of our couriers who just work for all of us, and they find that some shifts or some opportunities work for through Yellow, and other work better through the other brands. So I actually think it's been good having multi-players because they've helped grow the market and educate and how to do things, and also just engage people on an ongoing basis, give them the opportunity to do it full time. I mean, we may not necessarily have the opportunity for them to be a full-time rider driver, but the combination of the 3 of us or 4 of us then makes it real. So it's good.
It's fantastic. And at the end of the day, the consumer must get a better outcome because.
Well, you would think so. Well, they're more experienced as well, right?
Yes.
So. It's like taxi drivers, and British taxi drivers are supposedly the best because they know the geography and mapping service almost like the back of their hand. But we know, for example, when a driver or rider's worked a lot within the eastern suburbs or a particular few suburbs, they deliver faster. They know the streets without having to look them up on the map. They just know where it is and the way they go. So that is definitely the opportunity that this multifaceted or multi-driver marketplace allows that to happen.
That's awesome. And from a leadership point of view, then, I mean, you're competing with companies that are on a global scale, right? I know you guys are planning on going global as well, which is very exciting. How do you manage your team, make sure they're on the same page as what you're doing, create that company culture to lead from the front?
Look, that's difficult. I mean, I have built bigger teams than what we currently have in the past, and learned that it can be quite complex. And I suppose you get reminded of when you're not doing it right, to be honest, from time to time. But it is quite complex to keep people engaged and understand where the company's at and the vision of the company. And the way we try and do it is by communicating fairly regularly with the broader team. I mean, at this stage, it's relatively easy because we're 14 in Australia at the moment, which is a decent size. But as the team gets bigger, it's harder to do that. You don't have that personal touch and communication. So right now, it's not too bad. We have weekly get-togethers or even just catch-ups where we go, well, this is what's happening, what's going on in your space, put forward opportunities. If we feel like the strategy is not quite working, we discuss that and look at pivots. That's what's happened more recently where we were very focused on the sort of QSR space, and we still have a very strong presence there. But we're already looking at other verticals that can help us grow faster and complement the QSR space. QSR or quick service restaurants is very, I suppose, very heavy as far as the lunchtime and dinner. The demand is very high. But between those times, it can be quite sparse. So from that perspective, if we find verticals that can fill those gaps, then all of a sudden the marketplace is busy 24/7. So that's really very cool.
That's liquidity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The favorite buzzword.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So how do you then keep evolving yourself as a leader, to keep learning, to keep making sure that you're ahead of the game?
Talk to other people who are entrepreneurs. I mean, that's probably the main one for me. I mean, obviously, I attend a lot of events and presentations of fellow entrepreneurs and people who've done it before. I listen to lots of podcasts.
What kind of podcasts do you listen to?
I suppose the most popular one is it escapes me now. You put me on the spot. Thank you very much.
Scale-ups or something?
Yeah, no. Come on, Steve.
In like 5 minutes, it will come to you.
Yes, it will. I'll come back to that in a second. But from the podcast perspective, I pick up a lot of experience from people who are outside of my industry.
Yes.
The one I listened to recently was around a guy who just expanded his gym network, and it was all back on the basis of gym gear, right? And the way he was an ex-vet who. Just happened to, he was out there, on a tour and needed something to keep him strong, came up with this idea, and now he's a multi-billion-dollar company, So just those sort of things really inspire me, really simple products, people who not necessarily have had a great deal of experience in the sort of entrepreneur space.
Yeah, and you might hear some quick tips.
Absolutely.
Tools that you can use. Yeah.
And he started very late as well. He was in his 50s when he sort of did
that late.
Well, for this first time it is. So and I'm getting close to that as well. So but for his first time, that definitely was inspiring. For someone who to go and take that risk at that late age.
Yeah, and what kind of tools are you guys using to really hit the ground running? Especially trying to scale overseas. Like obviously Google Analytics, I'm assuming. Yeah, look,
and the analytics side of things is obviously very, very important to us. We probably don't leverage it as much as we should, to be really honest. Every tool is only as good as what you use it. We're looking at some sort of marketing automation tools, which we think will be quite beneficial going forward. Obviously, our CRM side of things. But customer success is really what's important to us. Things like Intercom we're looking at, platforms like Intercom, I should say, and they're the things I think that will help us scale globally and enable us to service the customers and provide reduce the churn, which is the key, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely. And so how do you keep monitoring your unit economics? Do you do this daily, weekly? Like, how do you run the business around that?
We don't monitor it well enough. Yep. We have data that's presented to us in reports on a regular basis, but probably what we'd like to do is have that up on a board somewhere, and so we see it every day. It is something that what we're finding is we're capturing lots and lots of data, and we're currently talking about how we can visualize that data much better than what we currently are. Yeah. We have it in some sort of rudimentary reports, but that's something that needs to improve dramatically as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And that's what I think will drive a lot of this. And that's what will drive the success. Drive the importance of things. Yeah. You don't realise how important some of these things are. Particularly, I think it's really interesting. It just literally came out of a couple of meetings where I'm talking to the sales team, we're talking to customer success team, talking to the tech team, and they all have their own perspective on what they think is important. And this is where having those stats available to everyone and the understanding across the board which ones are important for the business perspective, then all of a sudden a key feature which a technology person might think, I don't really see the importance of that, and the business guy go, what do you mean? It's the most important thing in the world. Why haven't we fixed that? So that's the challenge in a company like ours, where you have very different focuses and in some cases mindset. Yes. And trying to blend them together to make them all think about the same thing at the same time.
Which is a definite challenge.
Exactly.
So what's your style then of managing people?
My style? It's probably a bit old school. Look, it's a combination of setting some boundaries, but giving responsibility, right? It is challenging. It is the hardest thing of any
it's the most constant thing as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important to try and understand not only what the business is wanting to get out of it, but what the individual is trying to get out of it as well, as being part of a team. My sports person's background, I really enjoy the motivation side of things, and trying to get people on board and And that's what I think I've been able to do with all the businesses is recruit and engage them.
Yeah.
But I haven't been perfect all the time. But that's the challenge is trying to keep the motivation going, trying to get everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah.
And that's really probably what 90% of the challenge is.
Definitely. And you work with a lot of corporates, and we get a lot of questions from startups about, how's the best way to approach them? How can you work with them? Are they just an incumbent?
Yeah.
What's your recommendations on how to handle corporates?
Look, the size of the corporate changes the approach a little bit. So obviously big multinational or even just large national corporates. It is about being professional in your follow-up, in your presentation, in your...
Will you rock up in Converse or will you rock up in a tie?
I rock up in leather shoes and a collared shirt. I very rarely wear a tie these days.
Notice the collar is securely unfastened.
That's right. That's right. Like I won't rock up in a t-shirt until we've at least had 3 meetings. No, seriously, I mean, some of these big corporates, they're relatively casual these days as well. You don't see many ties at all in any environment at all. So from that perspective, you just got to try and match the level of formality. But what's more important is giving them confidence that you can do the job, regardless of how big you are. Now, we had meetings with McDonald's before we even had a product. And they were, we believe we sold the vision of what we wanted to be enough for them to engage us that early. And for a major corporation to do that, I think is testament to our ability to sell the vision. But also, I think it helps to have had lots of experience in doing it. Coming from an agency background, I learned a lot from working within advertising companies, and some really, really great salespeople and creative people, selling and communicating to the CEOs of major corporations, so having that exposure meant that I was able to learn how to communicate, what to say and what not to say. And even just way in which you position your brand, your product and everything else. And most important thing is that you have a story, right? You create a story around what it is you're doing and try and get them to come along for the ride. And that's what I try and do. Whenever I do a pitch, it's all about giving, not just talking about features and functionality, selling the benefits, but more importantly, making sure they're engaged in the whole process.
I've seen you pitch. That's been really good.
At times. I've had a shocker once, but I won't talk about that too much.
Well, what's the hardest lesson you learned?
Well, that was one. But, no, I won't go too much. I just had a bit of a brain freeze. Just had a bit of a brain freeze once, and
but that happens to everyone.
And didn't quite go so well. But look, it's hard to say what is the most important lesson. Because if you're not learning on a regular basis, then you may as well go and work for someone else. To be honest, I think as a someone who's out there to not only build a business and ideally make a good living out of it, if not a good exit, but you've got to enjoy the ride. And for me, the only way you can really enjoy it is if you're getting something out of it personally along the way. And I do that on a weekly/monthly basis. I'm learning all the time, whether that be how to manage people. I mean, it is challenging because I've been managing people now for, 20 odd years, and my management style has changed, yet come back, yet changed again.
Really?
So because it all depends on who's sitting on the other side of the table, right? So personality traits of the people you're managing also dictate in how you manage. I often give this analogy, again, coming from a sporting background. A sporting coach can be. You look at the coaches in rugby league, for example. You have Bellamy down in Melbourne, who you can see screaming through his window at him, right? And then you have a Wayne Bennett who's sitting back and not saying a word, right?
Yeah.
So yet they're both very successful.
Yeah.
So you can't say, well, that guy's going to be successful and this guy isn't. Well, they've just applied the way in which they do things to an environment that's actually worked, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it comes down to who's your team members and who is attracted to you and your personal management style.
Yeah. So you startups have to raise capital and deal with VCs, corporates, etc. through that process. Yeah. How do you manage your time from a startup point of view, making sure you don't lose focus from the business and obviously keep the doors open? And then how do you approach
the fundraising side of things? Yeah, look, there are times in the business where you have to focus 100% on fundraising, and there are times where you've got to do the reverse.
Yeah.
Obviously, a nice blend is good. Ideally, you're not spending any time on fundraising at some stage because you've raised enough funds and or you haven't needed to raise funds.
Yeah.
So it is a fine line sometimes. I find that I just get intuitively feel of where the business is at. If I feel that product/business development needs my attention, I will spend more time in doing that and less time away from raising funds. And in the reverse as well. So obviously there are deadlines sometimes. There's a really urgent meeting with a VC or a major client, then that has to take priority. But it is sometimes just a little bit of intuition that drives you one way or the other. Because at the end of the day, you've got to feel what you've got to prioritize based on what you think is going to be the most effective result for the business. Yeah.
So managing, obviously, the stress around that, the startup getting up and running, the team, etc. Mental health is a huge part of being your best as a leader.
Yep.
How do you manage your mental health in your headspace?
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't been asked that before. I think it's a challenging one because I go through different phases of what I would focus on from that perspective. Exercise is a massive thing for me. So I find that if I'm exercising regularly, I sleep better, I'm less stressed. So I think that's number one for me. I've gone through phases of yoga and meditation and things like that.
I'd love to see you concentrate for 3 minutes in a yoga room.
I
know I don't last, so I don't know how you do.
But I think they're very valuable things.
Yeah.
I just find I find it challenging when I feel like I've got a list of 100 things to do in the day. But I most importantly, you've just got to remain healthy. And whatever it is that makes you healthy, whether that be relaxation, whether it be training, whether it be the mind space, then all of that works together to making sure that you're more effective at work, right? So
very cool. And the startup ecosystem in Australia, a lot of people, obviously there's a lot of support in the community. It's accelerated a lot over the last 5 years. What are your thoughts on what do you think we can do better?
Another great question. Look, it has evolved a lot. I think more so in the last 7 years than it did prior.
Fish burners wasn't even around then, right?
That's right. And I was young enough to be around when the internet boom was happening.
What?
Yeah.
What's that?
So that was the startup space sort of creation, I think. In my opinion, where we used to go to meetups with investors and
with your briefcase with a phone.
Well, that's true. Okay, I'll just let that one slide. But
we'll delete that from the transcript, please.
I remember where the first meetups were T-shirts and long-haired techies and then all of a sudden when the dot-com boom happened, there were lots of suits. And it was a massive change, but it didn't change what I think is the most critical point, and I still don't think it's quite there yet. I think we're doing really well in education. I think we're doing really well in support, with all the fish burners, Miradees, et cetera of the world. the WeWorks even, you know. Definitely. So, you know, I think we're doing well in that ilk. Where I think we're still behind the 8 ball is in education to investors and just more people who've had successful startups who are willing to come back into the game. You know, I think that's when things will tick over. As much as there is money here, people are raising money, there's lots of funds and all these sorts of things, I still think that the challenge is that investors are still judging Australian companies as being Australian companies and are valuing them as Australian companies and not viewing them as global companies or the potential to be a global company. And that's where I think we struggle, because as a founder, it's very hard for a founder to be motivated if they lose 50% of their business on a $3 million raise, right? You know, it just can't. That can't happen.
So then with things like accelerators, because I mean, there's ones that take equity investments as well as part of that. I know you've been through accelerators. What part do you think that plays in the community?
Accelerators or the equity investment?
Or accelerators, whether they do or don't take equity in accelerators. Do you think they should be?
I think there's some. It's an interesting question. I think that there are some accelerators or some programs, because not all of them are accelerators. True, so some programs that I think abuse it a little bit, you know, without naming names. But there are others that I think that there are others that I think are fair. You know, they are adding and in some cases you want them on your books anyway, right? You want them on your register because they are a big brand, you know. So from that perspective, I think corporate investment is critical in Australia whilst we don't have the VCs and the private equity guys who are willing to invest at a higher valuation.
Right. Do you think the corporate's going to be willing to though?
I think they're more likely to.
Fair enough.
Yeah, in my opinion. I think, and I'm not saying that as being a greedy entrepreneur. I'm saying it as what I think is that they've got certain budgets that they will have, and you know, their primary goal could be about the complementary business they might be assisting to help them with their own business. The value they get out of it is more than just the investment side of things. So therefore, they might be willing to value it at a higher amount, and particularly when they can contribute to that growth. Now, there is counter-argument to that, which is, you know, because they contribute to the growth, therefore they discount it. Right. But if we really want startups to grow and we really want corporate involvement in that, they've got to come to the table with that sort of attitude. And some of the corporates that we've been dealing with around that subject matter have been really good. You know, they've really taken a more, I wouldn't say favoured, I would say fair approach. Yeah, and they understand that we're a startup and that the people involved in the startup are there and want to be engaged because they want an end game that's successful for everybody. And a lot of them struggle with innovation. So, you know, outsourcing innovation almost, for want of a better description, is actually really good for their business.
No, definitely. And do you think there's more money in the market or available to startups compared to there was 7 years ago? Just so your concern's more around the valuation? Yeah,
I think there is more money.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely more funds, you know, for venture capital funds.
So do you think the innovation boom with Malcolm Turnbull's campaign has had an impact on that?
Oh, maybe. Look, I think it was a start. But
stop recording.
No, I think look, at least it was heading somewhere, right? You know, it's better than previous prime ministers who didn't even give it a mention, right? But it's still not making any major waves, I don't think. And you know, I can't remember the exact article that I read recently, but they were talking about the doom and gloom of our industries, and there was no mention of the potential and the positivity around technology.
What's coming.
Yeah. So that still shows that there's probably a little bit to go from a government perspective. But I think there's definitely funding around. I just think that, like I said to you, I think we haven't had the major successes, and therefore the investors that are here are ones that are fairly conservative because they've potentially made good money off of fairly conservative type businesses. The technology world is a risky business, but it can, with risk, can be great rewards, and I think that it's a different mindset from an investor perspective.
Yeah, awesome. And this is back to your business.
Yeah.
Where do you think you'll be in 3 to 5 years then?
Well, definitely have international presence from a software perspective, technology perspective. That is our aim. I would say that
There's a massive upside.
with 3 to 5 years, I would say we've either been taken out by a competitor or a trade sale of some form.
What's a competitor look like to you?
Well, it's not. Interestingly enough, there's a company in the States called OLO, and for us, they have exactly the same vision as we do, and it's probably the first company that we saw that has really got exactly what we want to do as a company.
Except for not as good as you, of course.
Of course not. Although they have raised $65 million. See, that's what makes me angry. But anyway,
What series?
They raised. I think they raised 5, 20, and 45.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and they're identical business.
Yep. What kind of scale are they getting to?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that
they turn up this time to work.
Yeah, that's right. I do know that they're doing quite well. They're doing work with Amazon as well right now.
So traction.
Yeah, so they've got that. And I'm not saying it's not justified, right? But at the same time, you could see that even at their early stages, the funding difference, for seed versus Series A it's just chalk and cheese. So if you get $5 million as a seed round, we can do a hell of a lot with that, right? You can grow faster, you can build a team, you can make things happen. You get $300K, there's not a hell of a lot you can do. You can build a really good website.
Very expensive.
Yeah, I am being facetious, but it's an MVP and you got out there, right? But I just find that the opportunity for us, but what's more important is we have to go overseas to get the same sort of traction. Yeah. So if we're going to get the same sort of traction, we need the money more than the American guys do to actually get that level of traction. Yet we're afforded less, right? So from that perspective, that's where the challenge is of an Australian business operating from Australia. Yeah. So really, what you have, and this is why we find so many that go over to the US and do what they do.
Will you use any of the landing pad initiatives?
Well, that's what we're currently considering from that perspective. I'm a big before going over there, I want someone who's working with us who's local. Yep. And as much as I would like to just take the whole team over there. From our space, it's
road trip.
Yeah, road trip. In our space, it is relatively competitive, or seen as competitive. But with Olo as an example of what can be done, I think that's just proven and validated that there is a model that works within this space that isn't an Uber Eats, a Deliveroo, etc.
Yeah. Would you consider? I mean, obviously, there's this huge fascination with going to the States from Australia. Yeah. Have you considered another market, or is there a reason why you've chosen the States?
No, we have considered other markets, and we're still considering those. Singapore is actually one market we're currently considering. The UK is potentially one, but even Europe in general. Yes. But that has its own set of challenges around that. So we're at this stage open to. We're going to do some tests basically. Yep. So we're going to we're just about to launch our SaaS subscription model, and as soon as we do that, we're going to test and learn in different markets.
Good thing you have Tammy there.
Yes, that's right, exactly. Test and learn in different markets. So, and then we'll put the effort behind the one that's sort of taking off. I think that's and we can leverage existing relationships that we have. We have several international clients. So from that perspective, we would be tapping into those that are present, whether that be US or anywhere else around.
Wherever it works for the customers.
That's right.
Fantastic. I asked this to everyone. What is if you could have a superpower, what would it be? Oh, it's funny. There was something on Facebook the other day, and there was 3 options. There was go back in time, invisibility, and the third one I can't remember off the top of my head. But I said go back in time or time travel. Because then you could always go back and choose a different one. Change your route. That's right. So, look, I think, in all seriousness, time travel would be a good one. Because you'd learn a lot from history, real history, and obviously learn tremendous about what's coming in the future. So it's amazing. Every single entrepreneur that I've spoken to says something about time.
Oh, really?
Regaining time, going back and changing things, or it's always time-based.
Yeah, right, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe because it's so precious.
Yes. Precious. You're always running to the next month.
That's right. Well, the month almost feels like days, really.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, weeks fly through. And I've just remembered my podcast.
Oh, what is it? Just in time.
Masters of Scale is the one that...
That's what it was like, is it that scaling one?
So is that what you said?
No, sorry, that's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, Masters of Scale. Sorry. Well, there you go.
I just put up the Urban Youth founders, and they like the same podcast, so
it
seems to be a thing.
And there is another one which it's failing me as well, but it's old age.
Spring chicken. You can copy it in the links after.
I will.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. If people can support you, how can they do that? Connect you with corporates, check out the site.
Yep. Look, the main way in which people can support us is we're doing a couple of things at the moment. So we're obviously fundraising. So from that perspective, if there's any interest in investing in an organisation like us who are scaling very quickly and looking to go international, then we'd love to hear from you, or introduce us to someone who could help us, not just with only cash, but be part of the team. And from a employment perspective, we are hiring a tech team at the moment, so we're looking to grow our Node.js our team, as well as our mobile team. So if you're looking for work there, and from a business development perspective, any company that's looking for last mile delivery that wants to compete against Amazon, who are just about to hit our shores, then we are the company you should work with. Trust me.
That was a threat. Well, thank you. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you next time on the Facebook page. Cool.
Bye.